F.A.T.E. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. So we have recently completed our CCRAF pre-part webinar series. And so that series is the one that the certificate of participation is attached to. This one is really organized internally by us in ICA. And so this year we would have had the beginner to business series where we looked at vermicomposting, starting a small vermicompost enterprise, starting a small hydroponic enterprise, and also starting a small mushroom enterprise. And we want to say special thanks to our presenters. They did an excellent job. And thanks to you, our participants, for joining in, for the interest. And we do hope that those information have been relevant to you and persons within your network. As I indicated, I am working on the certificates, and so hopefully I could get this out to you soon. And so now what we are moving into is the special edition of the CCRAF, which is where we make the platforms available to persons, the general public, partners, stakeholders that are interested in sharing information with the general public. And so today we have Mr. Steve Maxime with us. I will not say too much about him. He wears quite a number of hats. He has a wealth of experience, and I'm really happy that we can have him on board with us, particularly on this topic, which is not, widely discussed and is something that is very important. And so I'm very happy that we have him with us today. Of course, as I mentioned, he has experience and expertise in a number of other areas. And so once he gives a little background about himself, then you could get a bit more, of a gist of the wealth of knowledge that lies within one man. And so after his presentation, we will have the discussion. And so that is where we would love for you to raise your hand, speak. We have persons from across the region. We want to integrate, get to know each other. I know some of us on here know each other already, but, please feel free to also turn on your cameras. So I know you all always see my face. So sometimes it's nice to see the faces and put the faces to the names, especially when I'm doing the certificates. And so we will do a quick wrap up and let you know what's coming up next, which is a session on aquaponics with Miss Mia Avril. She's currently stationed in the Bahamas, and we will share that with you. So of course, please feel free to drop your flag in the chat so we can know where persons are joining in from. You can use the raise hand, the different emojis on the Zoom. We will be recording it, the session, and it will be made available on our YouTube channel for persons who want to rewatch or for persons, who have to leave a bit early. So if we have anybody new, welcome, and we are very happy to have you with us. So the CCRAF, the Caribbean Climate Responsive Agriculture Forum, it was born out of the need to have more specialized, specific agriculture knowledge as it relates to the Caribbean. I know we could go online and we will see lots and lots and lots of information. Sometimes it's very difficult to get something that is relevant and practical for us sometimes, or we have to end up trying so many different things. And so that is the general idea of the CCRAF. It's a knowledge to action framework. While we do a lot of those webinars, those workshops, what we try to do is translate that to action. So within the webinars, we present it in a very practical manner that you could use almost immediately. And then what we would have launched is the CCRAF on the road, where we come in the countries in person to do those practical sessions on the ground with you. Of course, it requires us coming together, building that community. And so we want the region to join us. We do have persons outside of the region, particularly Pacific, Africa, Asia, all these different regions, Latin American regions that join us. And so we always talk when we're in meetings that we need more collaboration to do things. And so this is the opportunity. Of course, if there are any persons out there, partners, companies, institutions that want to, collaborate with us on some of these initiatives, we welcome that. Just send us an email and we can work out something in collaborating. And as I mentioned, important for us is translating that knowledge to action on the ground. So we don't want to only just have the webinars, but we want to have some sort of hands-on initiative, because sometimes it's one thing to tell you how to do something, but it's another thing when you learn how to actually do it on the spot. So we do have a number of platforms. We have the websites, we have social media, we have the AgriProfiles repository, we have our YouTube channels, our Facebook, X, LinkedIn, YouTube. So we have a wide range of areas where you can access all the information for free. So don't always wait for the emails, because I know some person's emails tend to get full. So try not to sync your photos with your Gmail on your phone. That will help in terms of getting space in your email. So with that, I pass you on into the capable hands of Mr. Steve Maxime. And so today our topic will be looking at intellectual property, a hidden tool for securing our food, agriculture, tourism, and environment. I know many times we talk just agriculture, and as I said, we're talking about community collaboration, and these sectors are not standalone. We impact each other in many ways. And so we have Mr. Maxime with us today to speak to us on that topic in a practical manner. And please, any questions that you may have, please put them in the chat, and during the discussion, raise your hands and we will unmute you. So persons who are now joining in, please just feel free to put your country in the chat, anything you would like to say, and any questions you have once we're moving into the discussion. So over to you, Steve, to say a little about yourself and head into the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Nikita. Are you hearing me properly?
Yes, I'm hearing you clearly. Yes.
Great. So thanks a lot for having me. Welcome, everyone. I was glad that Nikita mentioned the magic word knowledge, because I am very keen on that divide that is part of what I like to refer to as the DCOW continuum. So there's data, there's information, there's knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And far too often we get stuck at the information phase. So what I'm going to be presenting today, it's a bit of information that you can find anywhere. I mean, Google University, YouTube channels. But what I want us to do after that initial slide presentation where we do the information, we interrogate that information so that it becomes part of your knowledge platform, part of your knowledge hub. So that's how I'm going to proceed for the next 20 or so minutes, and then we'll get into the really important part, the open discussion. So let me just share my screen. Are you seeing my?
Yes, good to go.
Excellent. Okay, so this is a topic, a rather, unusual topic for most people. But this is how I want to go about it. So I want to give you the rationale for why I feel I should be delivering a topic like this. I'm going to give you a definition of intellectual property, Caribbean perspectives, on the ground, practical. Then we're going to talk about a very important link between IP and lawyers. Then we're going to talk about IP in real life with numerous examples, and I will try to pull examples from all 15 CARICOM countries that may be represented here and other places as well. I'll say a little bit about conducting an IP audit, whatever that is, and then we'll talk about monetizing your IP. But you'll notice that monetizing your IP is just before the open discussion. This is where you're going to get to ask the questions that may be going around in your head now, which would have prompted you to actually attend this webinar. So let's get cracking. In terms of the rationale for why I'm doing this, in 2003, I launched this virtual consulting firm called SBI, Science-Based Initiatives. And the tagline was positively impacting the fate of the Caribbean, where FATE stands for food, agriculture, tourism, and environment. And long before that, I realized that the fate of the Caribbean is tied up in those four sectors. that link between food, agriculture, tourism, and environment. I was also lucky enough to be on the cabinet-appointed committee that wrote the intellectual property policy for Trinidad and Tobago. Remember, you're going to get all of these in the recording, so if you want to read stuff, you can do that when you pause the recording. But for the purposes of this introduction, I'm giving you the rationale for why I feel I should be doing this. I was also lucky enough, again, to conduct one of the earliest IP strategies for Trinidad and Tobago. This is a nationwide thing that I did in 2012. I was also involved with what is called a collective management agency. In other words, there are these agencies that protect intellectual property, usually in terms of copyright and reprographic rights. And here I am signing one of the first licenses with the Trinidad and Tobago government for the Trinidad and Tobago Reprographic Rights Organization. Another part of the rationale for this delivery is that I've been trying for years to get CARICOM moving on geographical indications, the UPOF convention, and especially something called freedom to operate. If you have never heard that phrase before, freedom to operate, then you're going to enjoy this session. Apart from the rationale as well is that I've been quoted, even been Hansard in Trinidad, in saying that when land space is limited, your head space has to be expanded. In other words, you need creativity, science, and IP to survive this current climate crisis. So there was all of that that led me into thinking that I could do a session like this. So what is intellectual property? Intellectual property is the express creation of the human mind. Simply enough sounding definition, but I want you to pay attention to certain words. Intellectual, that tells you that it has something to do with your head and thinking and your mind. Property means it's something that you can own. Creation has to do with your own creativity. And one of the more important words is expressed. So intellectual property is the expressed creation of the human mind. It is not just a creation of the human mind that you kept to yourself as an idea, but it has to be expressed. And usually it's in the form of intangible assets like inventions, literary and artistic works, designs, symbols, blah, 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 all of which we'll come to in a bit. But back in 2011, I did a poster for use in the national media, trying to explain to everyday folks what intellectual property was all about. And it's actually, this poster says just this. If you have ever created anything from scratch, an original essay, a poem, a report, a song, if you have modified an existing tool, if you've used a totally new product, come up with a totally new tool or machine, if you have ever done a how-to manual, if you have ever taken a photograph or done a video, if you ever created any works of mass or works of art, if you ever came up with a unique recipe, if you ever developed software, but then if you have done any of those things, and there are a lot more that I could add, but if you have done any of these, then you have created intellectual property, you own intellectual property. And this is what we are going to be talking about for the next couple of minutes. But before we get any further, I think it is very, 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 very important that we make this link between IP and lawyers. Now, in capitalistic and any other types of societies, the concept of property is meaningless without ownership. Let me repeat that. The concept of property is meaningless without ownership. Without ownership, which is defined as the right to exclude others, to manage or dispose of a resource, then your property becomes part of common rights. It's free for all. Any and everybody could use it. Anybody and everybody can have access to it. And this is where lawyers come in. The lawyers provide a proof of ownership. Remember I said that you can't consider anything as property if you can't show that you own it, because property is meaningless without ownership. So the link between IP and lawyers is this. And with due respect to all the lawyers in attendance, and I know there are quite a few of them, some who are some of my very good friends, they are not usually the creators of IP. Listen to me carefully here. They are not usually the creators of IP. They are involved with intellectual property rights. And if you go back to the lead slide, you would see that this session is about IP. It is not about IP rights necessarily, because to be able to have that session, I would have to be a lawyer. Because rights protection is an entirely large and bludgeoning field of endeavor for legal scholars, a society to which I most certainly do not belong. So I'm telling you this in the sense that we are going to be talking about intellectual property primarily, but we have to be aware of the fact that there's an aspect of it called intellectual property rights, and the rights and the rights protection is the domain of lawyers. I mean, from whom I have a healthy respect. But unfortunately, in the Caribbean, intellectual property is seen as a legal imposition rather than an economic imperative. And I hope by the time we have finished our little hour and a half open discussion, you'll be able to agree with me when I tell you that most people think of IP as something to do with a legal imposition. Somebody wants to ban somebody or ban them from copying or ban them from copying a recording or a song and all that. And far too often, most Caribbean people think that IP is just some legal thing that you hear other people talk about that has nothing to do with you, rather than seeing it as an economic imperative. And this is a point I'm going to be raising a lot as we go along. So in terms of the link between IP and lawyers, let's just come up with a very simple example. When you own agricultural land, and agricultural land as a tangible property now, you need lawyers to provide proof of ownership via a deed or a lease so that you can exercise your rights. If you did not have a lawyer-prepared conveyancing document, I'm just trying to sound as if I know enough legalese, a deed or a lease, then you have no way of proving that you own that land. And I could come and tie out my animals on that land if I feel like it. I could walk through it, I could trespass, I could do what the hell I want, because you do not have proof of ownership. And that is where you need the lawyers. And the same thing happens with intangible property like brands, etc., where you need lawyers to protect your rights to the brand and all of those other goodies, which we are going to discuss in a bit. So I'm just going to pause for just one quick second. If there's anybody who has any burning question in the chat, Nikia, that I need to, if I've lost anybody so far. Nikia, are we?
No, we're good.
We good?
We'll just take during the discussion.
All
Yeah.
right, great.
I will note them and we'll take them during any of
Okay,
them
great.
during the discussion. Yes. Go ahead.
So now, when we come to talking about intellectual property in real life, one of the first areas I want to talk about is brands and trademarks. And a brand is very simply this. It is a set of expectations. Let me repeat that. A brand is just a set of expectations. When you see a particular brand, things go through your head. When you're traveling and you're in a very strange country and you're not sure what is safe to eat, and you see, whether you're a fast food fan or not, when you see a Pizza Hut or a KFC or what have you, you know what to expect. And that's what a brand is. A brand is about expectations. So when you buy a Coca-Cola, I'm sorry to be advertising all of these foreign brands, but when you buy a Coca-Cola anywhere in the world, you're expecting it to taste a particular way, to be produced in a particular kind of way, and you're expecting it to be safe. You don't expect to drink a Coca-Cola and get food poisoning because you trust that brand. But just as a side note, clever people like myself who feel we're so bright I have been caught already drinking Coca-Cola in a country where the water isn't safe to drink. And being such a bright fellow, they only had warm Coke at the time. And the guy asked me if I would take ice with it. And I said yes. And of course, nobody makes ice with bottled water. So that ice was normal tap water. I was sick like a dog for about 2-3 days. So I'm saying that the brand is what gives you the expectations. Of course, if you go and take the Coca-Cola that has its expectations and then you add ice that has been made from impure water, well then, literally crap will smoke your pipe. So on this whole business about brands and trademarks, I want to start with the very, very first example, and that is this whole concept of a personal brand. You all have a brand. You may refer to it as part of your reputation, but we all come with a brand. Let me explain what that means in real life. And the very first time I found out what my brand was many, 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 many years ago. I was part of a little think tank of crop protection specialists in Trinidad and Tobago. And we would have monthly meetings. And there were some of the crop protection specialists from the ministry, other subject matter specialists like myself. We would meet at the Agricultural Development Bank or at the ministry or at Centeno for the trainees. And we'd have these monthly meetings. And on this particular day, this particular monthly meeting, I was hosting it at the ADB in Trinidad, in Port of Spain. And one of my colleagues, George Bala, turned up for the meeting and he said this in public. And that's when I understood what my brand was. He said in public that I am in a very, very bad mood today. I had a lousy morning. And the only reason I'm coming to this meeting is because I know Steve would be here and Steve would be in a good mood. And there would always be something that we'd be laughing and talking about. So I decided I would brave the traffic and come down to Port of Spain just because I knew Steve was going to be here and Steve hosted. And that's when I started understanding that your brand, you're associated with certain kinds of things. People have certain expectations when your name comes up. So when you hear, well, in this case, you hear Steve Maximi, you know that there's going to be a certain amount of old talk involved. There's going to be a certain amount of levity involved. And you can be sure that, if you're in a particularly bad mood, you will not be hearing a depressing story from Steve, regardless of the circumstances. And that's part of what your personal brand is about. When people hear your name or they see you, they have expectations. Let me repeat that. They have expectations. They kind of almost know what to expect from you. If your brand is associated with slackness, laziness, whatever it is, unfortunately, then that is your personal brand. And you'll have to work hard to change people's opinion or to change people's view of your reputation. So that brand comes with you. That's part of your personal brand. We're more familiar, of course, with enterprise brands, which is what do you expect when you see certain signs, certain trademarks, or certain brand marks? And because all of this is being done as a story through my Caribbean eyes, I'm going to be telling you about brands and people that I've been associated with over the last 30-something years, so that these stories that I'm telling you are not from the perspective of a European or North American. They have Caribbean-based, Caribbean-born, Caribbean experience into the 15 CARICOM countries that I've worked in over the last 30 years. So these two particular brands here are very, very close to me. To your left would be Y Farm. We help youth farm. So Alpha Senon, who is now Dr. Alpha Senon, was the creator of that brand. And when you saw Y Farm, when you saw Agriman comic books, and so that brand hit you early o'clock. Because over the years, Alpha and his colleagues, including the late George Caesar, would have instilled in you an expectation when you see that brand. Same for Tech for Agri, which is the brand of my very good friend Karen Bascom. So I'm telling you that a brand is a type of intellectual property. In other words, it's something that you have, the creativity of some human mind has been expressed in a particular form, and that form now has a way of being used and being protected. Now, if we are saying that intellectual property in real life has to do with brands and has to do with expectations, then let me just go through some of these brands that are at the bottom here. To the extreme left is fair trade. And again, this is something that I'm not just telling you tales out of school. I'm telling you about experiences that I have had, that I was involved in. And I'm speaking from the point of view, as the Americans would say, I was in the room when it happened. So when fair trade came to the region via WINFA, I was on the board of WINFA at the time. I facilitated the strategic planning session where we made the strategic decision to go the route of fair trade and Max Havelaar, etc. So that when you see a fair trade brand, especially if you're European or you're British and you go into a supermarket and you see that brand, the expectation is that this particular fruit was produced on a farm where people care about the producer, where people care about the environment, where we are prepared to pay a little extra, and that extra was in the form of the social premium, so that we can reward these producers for doing the right thing. Let me repeat that. I think this bears repetition. When you start seeing the importance now, the economic importance of a brand, of intellectual property. So by having this fair trade brand, Windward Island bananas commanded a different price altogether from Chiquita and other bananas on the European market. Because, as I said, it is all about interconnections. We are talking about food, we are talking about agriculture, we are talking about tourism. And I think an aspect of tourism that is not fully explored outside of, very, very narrow circles has to do with culinary tourism. Because a lot of the tourist experiences are tied to food. And where does that food come from? The agricultural sector. And where is all of this being done? Within the natural or the biotic environment. So that's the link, part of the link between the fate of the Caribbean. What is going to set the tone for if the Caribbean survives or not? And I'm not being melodramatic, I'm being very serious. So it's between food, agriculture, tourism, and environment, because we know all the governments are locked into this tourism thing. So they're not going to abandon that anytime soon. So we have to be sure that we can use the environment, whether it be through ecotourism or your Toraricas and so for the Surinamese, and get all of that into one big IPRI brand or label. And that's when I go on to Green Globe. Green Globe is an environmental certification. I was lucky enough to be a Green Globe consultant back in the day, like in the early 2000s. And what Green Globe does is that it certifies that your property is being managed in a particular kind of way, that your employees are being sourced from the local communities, that you are using environmentally sensitive techniques, you're not using as much bleach and harmful chemicals that will impact the environment, that your food is being sourced from local farmers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the brand in the middle for the Trinis has to do with NAMDEFCO. The Jamaicans would understand Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement stuff, branded stuff. And then the one at the extreme right is from my very good friend, Lennox Lampkin in St. Vincent from Lana Farms. When you get a box from Lennox, the expectation is that this is organically produced stuff. It may not have the official, very expensive organic label in the strictest sense of that organic brand, but that LANAF brand means something. So if I'm in St. Vincent and I see something coming out of a box with that label on it, I'm eating it. I mean, not necessarily saying that I'm not going to wash it, but I'm going to eat it confident that, that I'm sure that there were no toxic chemicals used in the production. So that's the power of brands and trademarks, especially within our sectors in food, agriculture, tourism, and the environment. Now, another type of IP that has to do somewhat with branding and trademarks is something called geographical indications, which I would have mentioned in the very first or second slide that I've been trying over the years to get CARICOM governments to take this thing seriously. And so far, if you look at the image at the top left of your screen, those would be all of the countries that would have had geographical indications for rum. Now, let me just explain what a geographical indication is. A geographical indication is a brand or a stamp on a product that says this product was produced in a particular geographic location, and that gives it special properties. Very, very special properties. Properties for which you can charge more than the average, if you understand what I'm saying. So one of the most popular examples of geographical indications have to do with the term champagne. You could produce the best sparkling wines in the world. You could be in California, you could be in South Africa, you could be wherever, and produce the most spectacular sparkling wines in the world. You cannot call it champagne unless the grapes were grown in the Champagne Valley in France. As simple as that. You can buy rice, bulk rice, all over the place, but basmati rice means something. And usually the means something means that it costs more because you're paying for that quality, you're paying for that expectation that comes with branding. So that in terms of the Caribbean, we have been very, very, very slow off the mark. And I mean, despite the efforts of, some of my really good friends, the Malcolm Spencers and the Reagan Asgardis of this world, we have been trying, laboring literally in the vineyards, and we have gotten very few geographical indications done. To the right, you're seeing Jamaica jerk, and thing which has a geographical indication because you would understand the significance of that. I mean, everybody and their brother talks about jerk, as you know, but the authentic Jamaican jerk is something that has a geographical indication. And if we catch you selling some makeup jerk seasoned anywhere in the world and passing it off as Jamaica jerk, we can shook our lawyers at you. That's why I was telling you the importance of the legal fraternity. And the fact that this whole concept of intellectual property is not about making life difficult for people, Intellectual property is about understanding how you reward people for their creativity. Let me repeat that. It is about rewarding people for their creativity. It is not about spite. It is about rewarding. And for you to be able to reward people, you have to give them ownership. Because only way you can reward me for something is if I can prove that I own it. And that is why I'm telling you that, the lawyers and the legal experts are the ones who we have to have, a healthy respect for, because they are the ones who provide the frameworks for us to be able to be rewarded economically and financially for our creativity. Because in the absence of that, in the absence of a World Intellectual Property Organization, it would be a free-for-all, and there would be no guarantee that you would be rewarded for your creativity. I hope I made that point very clear. So when we get into the open discussion and you can see me and we can have a conversation, we'll talk about that. Now, Jamaica Blue Mountain Coffee, is listed under this geographical indications pane, but the lawyers will tell you that this is a somewhat roundabout way in that it is the brand that is being protected and it's not a strict IP in the very legal sense. But we'll get onto that when we have the open discussion. Now, when it comes to IP in real life, you would notice that one of the first things I mentioned is that if you have ever created an original essay, if you have ever written a poem, it doesn't matter how bad the poem is, how much it doesn't rhyme, it has no reason. Any report that you ever wrote in your life, especially if it was a report that your employers did not specifically say was their intellectual property, then that's your intellectual property. Any database that you would have collected is your intellectual property. And you may be telling me, well, Steve, this songs are like a lot of rubbish, because everybody and their brother wrote an essay already. Everybody and their brother wrote a poem. I mean, every 14-year-old who was infatuated with some schoolgirl would have written a poem, roses are red, violets are blue, I can't understand how I'm living without you. Those kinds of things. But one of the things we have to be very clear about is that intellectual property is property. When you start talking about the value of the property, that's when the fun starts. Because that poem that you wrote when you were 14, may only have value to you and your sweetheart if you ended up marrying that same person. So as far as the two of you are concerned, that is valuable property. You'll want to frame that poem. But for the rest of us in the real world, we think it was rubbish, right? So that just because you own property doesn't mean that it's high value property. So let's get that straight. I mean, we all see tangible examples of that. I mean, your dad could have left, a half-acre of land to you. And when you go to see a half-acre of land, it's perpendicular. I mean, that is not going to be land with the same value of land in Stony Hill or land in West Moorings or land in Belize City. Yeah. So I want us to be very clear on this. I made a bold statement at the beginning that everybody owns IP. Everybody owns intellectual property. Everybody would have done an essay, would have done a report, would have done a poem, would have collected a database. Now, when we talk about valuing it, that's something later we're going to talk about in the next 10 minutes or so when we talk about IP audits. But let us not mistake it. Property is property. When we start talking about the value of the property, but that's when the fun starts. And I'm hoping that a lot of you would be aware of the fact that we are having this seminar in the month of April. And April 26th every year is designated as World Intellectual Property Day. So those of us who are intellectual property nerds and get involved in this kind of thing all the time, we celebrate it every year, right? This year, the particular theme is on sports. And you may want to know, well, okay, well, we're talking about food, agriculture, tourism, and environment. How's Steve going to sneak in sports in that? Well, sports nutrition. Yeah. There have been a number of opportunities for the valuation of creative use of nutrients, whether it is in a coconut infused drink, or whether it is something that Rihanna is using, or if it's something that somebody else is using as an electrolyte base. There are a number of opportunities. As I say, it is only when you start thinking along the lines of, what have I created? What new blend did I come up with? What new recipe? It is only then that you understand the value of property. The fact that you can own something, you can own the rights to the way something is made, the way something is used. So that when we look at this thing about an original essay or poem or report, you may think that, well, Steve, that's kind of stretching it, because what use is a database? Let me just tell you how I have seen, and remember, all I'm telling you about is stuff that I have witnessed for myself or been part of it. The way that you take a database that seems like just an arbitrary collection of names and people doing what. If you had a database of all the farmers in your country and you had an idea of what they were producing and when it would be ready and when they would need certain types of agrochemicals or certain types of services, do you now understand how you could monetize that? Knowing that gives you an edge. If you are a garden shop owner, a provider of services, if you knew how many people are going to be using Beauregard sweet potato at a particular time and who would need particular kinds of inputs, if you had that database in your possession, then you could monetize that by having a head start on everybody else in the country in terms of how you sell these particular people, particular services. So things like client lists, knowing all the people who have solar powered pumps, knowing all the people who are going to need help with their inverters. Those kinds of databases seem like just a compilation of stuff that you put together, but you can monetize that. You can use that for your economic benefit because it is your property. It is something that you put together from scratch. So for the provision of services, for taking care of people's operational needs, etc., these are all the things that you can be using it for. So when we get into the open discussion, I'm hoping we can have some more discussion on that. But on the topic of sport as being the central theme for I.P.E., I can't resist the temptation to ask those of you who follow basketball, if you remember the big court case with Kobe Bryant and some of his early writings. Now, listen to me carefully, yeah? If your son, your 14-year-old son, writes a poem, on about anything, it is only going to be worth something to you and his grandparents. And will probably be on the fridge. But if that 14-year-old grows up to be an internationally famous superstar, every scroll, every bit of paper that he would have written on in his entire life is now going to be worth literally millions. So I'm just showing you that, it's all a matter of timing and concept and how you market the property. As a 14-year-old, if Kobe Bryant scribble on a piece of paper on a fridge, nobody cares about that. But as Kobe Bryant, as part of his estate, people would want to own that scribble. So coming back to IP in real life again, we said that it has to do with the modification of an existing tool or maybe making a totally new product. I think most people are familiar with patents and the fact that, you can invent a new machine and you can get protection from it. I think most people have that concept in the back of their head, and as far as they're concerned, well, I never really make nothing, Steve, so I don't understand all this patent stuff. It have nothing to do with me. I'm not an engineer. I've never made anything, so don't come with that by me at all. But you own IP if you've come up with a modification of an existing tool, or if you have developed a totally new way to use a tool. This is the difference between invention and innovation. Invention requires an inventive step. In other words, you have to come up with something brand new. Innovation means that you're taking something that was invented already and you're using it in a new way. Now, before I go on to talk about patents, I'm going to remind you about that phrase I asked you about, freedom to operate. And if you never heard it before, I'm going to be happy to explain it to you today so that next time you hear somebody talk about freedom to operate, it will mean something to you. So now if I look at it, the two examples I used there, one is a cassava grater. The other one is just a simple, water harvesting contraption, literally, attached to a pump. Now, why am I putting that in? Because within the Caribbean, there have been a number of innovations that could have been protected that weren't. I mean, I remember working in Tapakuma in the Tri-Lakes area in Guyana, and some of their cassava drying techniques and so were, unique, just to say the least. Working with the female producers in Charity, and so you pass through Anna Regina, you go down to Charity, and you find that they're using techniques there, they're using dry methods there that may or may not have been part of the traditional knowledge, which is also a means of protecting people's creativity, which is another means of intellectual property, right? So that we as Caribbean people have been allowing ourselves to come up with innovations and not be aware that not only are they valuable, that there are mechanisms to protect them. So that in some jurisdictions, I know like Trinidad and Jamaica, and I think Barbados as well, they are what are referred to as petty patents. In other words, you do not get a patent for the creation of something totally new, totally inventive step, but there are creative lawyers and so on who are able to deal with the legislation to give you partial protection through things called petty patents, which we will talk about in the open discussion. But I just wanted to mention here now that business about freedom to operate has to do with a very important aspect of intellectual property. and the fact that intellectual property rights were created to not only protect people, but to expand the science. And this is where I hope any of the university lecturers who are on this call are going to be able to sit down and reflect. Because what I'm telling you about is from my own personal experience as the person who ran the very first business office in a science faculty within the UE system. And it was at that stage that I realized that we were literally bouncing our heads in the Caribbean. I remember the very first time I met an IP scout. I had no idea what an IP scout was. An IP scout is a professional, usually in Europe and North America and so, who is going through all the literature, all the academic literature, and all these publications by our bright scientists, picking through them and then deciding what they're going to take and protect and use as their own, with slight modifications. But because and I'm saying this in the context of 2003, 2004, so I don't know if things have changed in UE, if things have changed across the board. So please forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn. But I can tell you, at that time, none of my colleagues had a clue about the fact that when you rush to publish or perish, as they used to say, that you are already putting out information and research into the ethos that other more creative people can now take, manipulate, and protect and sell back to you later on. So at the time, and I'm not just making tales up, I'm not just telling tales out of school. At the time, only Professor Ramsey Saunders that I met would have understood, the use of patterns and so, and the fact that there were students who were doing research projects that could have been protected otherwise and weren't. And I'm talking about fields like bioremediation, fancy sounding scientific fields that have to do with the use of living material to remedy environmental conditions. Do you see where the F.A.T.E comes in again? Food, agriculture, tourism, environment. So we, and when I say we now, I'm referring to when I lived in Trinidad as a Trini citizen. You had the oil spill, and we now, as in UE and UE lecturers, were working on bioremediation principles. In other words, there are certain microorganisms that you can literally throw into the water behind the oil and it will clean it up. I mean, I'm being melodramatic, but that is the gist of it. And we had students at the time who were working on stuff like that. And then they were being encouraged to publish. And if you publish, you might get kudos in the academic community, but there'll be these IP scouts out there just looking for opportunities like that to come and monetize it and ensure that you do not benefit from your intellectual property. And the final point on this is that if you are a researcher, if you're a university lecturer, and you never heard about patent scope, you never heard about the intellectual property digital library, then you're in a bad way. Because it means that you do not have access. And this is part of what the World Intellectual Property Organization is all about. It's about advancing the science. So you can go onto these databases, which are publicly available and free, and see what is the state of the science. So in my time, and when I say my time now, I'm talking about 2003, 2004, 2005, university lecturers were giving students projects on what they thought were cutting edge issues, when all of those things were already in the intellectual property digital database as having been done somewhere in some university in Egypt where they were bright enough to patent it before they actually publish it. So I'm saying all this to say that that is where freedom to operate comes from. Because with patents, a patent is a territorial right. Let me just explain that quickly before we get to the open discussion. A patent is a territorial right in the sense that when you get protection for a patent, it has to be in named countries or, as the lawyers amongst us would know, if it's part of the Patent Cooperation Treaty, then it's part of, group and geographical regions. But the point I'm making behind all of this is that you could go to the patent database, see the designs for a cassava grater, ensure that protection is not being sought in St. Vincent or in Trinidad or in Grenada or in the Bahamas or wherever you are, and then you have now the freedom to operate. You can build that thing, use it without infringing the patent, because the patent does not cover your country in terms of enforcement of the rights. You could then take that machine, that cassava grater, whatever it is you made, and you could export it to St. Vincent if St. Vincent isn't covered. Of course, you will run into real serious problems if you try to sell it in Jamaica, where the patent may be enforced, right? But we'll talk about this more in the open discussion, but that is what freedom to operate is all about. And I'm sure there are lawyers in the audience who will be able to help me explain that in better terms. Now, other examples of IP in real life, a modification of an existing tool or a machine or so. This is the green machine developed by Dr. Braffett, Chelston Braffett. Now, there's nothing new, with all due respect to Dr. Braffett, who I like, as you know. I mean, there's nothing, he didn't invent this. It's an innovation. He has put together an aquaponics unit to his specifications, the specification that he has described. So whilst his lawyers are working out that, he now has something that he can sell as a green machine, as a particular technology that has been modified to suit Bayesian conditions. So this is what would have brought me to that whole business about patents and freedom to operate, which I tried my best to explain quickly earlier. We are dangerously close to 12 o'clock here, so I want to finish this part of it before, so that we can have a whole hour for discussion. Talking about IP in real life, you also have things like a how-to manual. In other words, if you wrote how to do something that is your intellectual property, you could sell that. And this again is by Chelston Braffett. Again, I'm only using examples that I'm personally involved in it. So I would have done the technical editing of this production. So that's why I have the freedom to be able to use it now as an example, as a how-to manual. Yeah. Now, this is a very, very controversial one. If you have ever taken a photograph, then you've owned intellectual property. Now, when I say this is really fun, I mean, the Trinidadian and Tobagoan citizens on this call, or those people who follow Calypso and soca and so, might remember a very, very prominent case in Trinidad where a deceased Calypsonian, his wife, did an advertisement for a show, a fundraising benefit, using a photograph of her husband that was taken by a professional photographer. And the professional photographer claimed his rights that he has to be paid for that photograph. Even though it's a photograph of your husband, it doesn't matter. The photographers own the rights to the reproduction of their photograph. Let me give you a more classic example. You're having your wedding. You're the groom, you have your bride, you hire a photographer. The photographer comes and takes pictures of your wedding. You do not own those photographs, even though you are the subject of the photograph. The photographer owns those photographs. You know why? Because it is his creativity. It is because of him that he got Auntie Judy to stand up next to Mommy, because under normal circumstances, they probably won't stand up together. But he has now been able to frame a photograph where you have Tanti Midwell standing up next to this one, and he used the right f-stop. For those of you who are into photography and so would know what I'm talking about, use the right f-stop, and he used the right lighting, etc., the right flash, bounce the flash off the wall. And that photograph now is an expression of his creativity. It had nothing to do with the people who are standing up being photographed. So that's why I tell you, this is a particularly controversial one, so that as extension officers, as workers in the field, you may have taken photographs. And if somebody decides to use that photograph in an FAO publication or in any kind of publication and didn't give you, and didn't credit you, and then find out what it would cost, I mean, you could waive the fees, That's not the point. I'm talking about ownership now. And as I said, as part of your property, you own it. You own it. And you have the right now to allow people to copy it or to dispose of it or to use it however they want. I shouldn't even say however they want, because there are certain aspects of copyright, which is the right to copy something, which have to do with the use. So in other words, if I, let me give you an example, try and pull out an example quickly. All right. If my 14-year-old son, who is Muslim, produces a jingle for a competition in school, and then some advertising agency sees that jingle and asks for permission to use that jingle in an ad for pork or bacon, I think you're starting to see where I'm heading with that, right? So there's also the right of copy is not total and absolute. It has to be within the confines of what the owner of the material thinks is appropriate. And the same goes for videos, obviously. Now, when we talk about works of mass and art and things, people start asking us, what the hell that have to do with agriculture, Steve? Well, it has to do with art and the use of artistic expressions. I mean, we have all seen these wireframes. I mean, there was a time when every bit of signage everywhere in the Caribbean had to do with a wireframe. People would spell out UE or they spell out this, that, and the other. So that, in terms of your creativity, remember, these are all express creations of the human mind. So somebody owns the right to those images and those productions. And even more spectacularly, when you talk about works of mass or art or fashion, and this is an aspect of that we seem to have lost in the Caribbean. There was a time when Sea Island cotton was understood as being, a unique fabric. So now when you get the combination of artwork on a unique fabric, you get batik on Sea Island cotton like that printed at the top there. What about the use of indigo plants? And I'm hoping that my very good friend Denise Carew is on this set, because she's currently doing her PhD and doing a lot of work on indigo. It's a plant that is used to provide dyes, again, to be used in fashion and art. I mean, the St. Lucians would know that there are a number of, shouldn't say a number, but there are a couple of producers in St. Lucia that use banana fibers to produce fabric, etc. And then there's also food art. In other words, how do you present food in an artistic manner? And that you own that as well. You own anything that has to do with your creativity and your creativity being expressed. That is intellectual property by definition, as we said in the beginning. So I'm running through these quickly so that we can have the discussion, and you can see me and watch me eye to eye and see where all of this old talk is coming from. A unique recipe. I mean, the most spectacular example in my life that has to do with that is Angostura bitters. And I was lucky enough to have seen the original trade secret document where Angostura bitters is registered as a trade secret in Trinidad. And I want to publicly thank Reagan. I hope Reagan is online, Asgaradi, for affording me that pleasure. I mean, that was something that was done, centuries older, that protection. And then, of course, you have more distinct recipes that may not be as exotic or as unique, but have to do with how people present things. In the Caribbean, we tend to have an unhealthy fascination with pepper sauce. Everybody in the Caribbean feels their aunt has the best pepper sauce. I mean, you talk to people in Belize, don't talk about Jamaicans with their Scotch bonnet, don't talk about the Trinis with their scorpion and the moon red, etc. Everybody feels they have a unique recipe. If you have a unique recipe, and you're really sure that that is the only way that this thing can be made and you possess it, then you can copyright that, you can have that recipe listed as yours. Once you can prove, again, that's where lawyers come in, that nobody has done that before. And it is really unique. And I mean, the example we used to play around with when I was involved in intellectual property circles in a more Caribbean-wide way with Jaipur, with the Jamaica office and with Trinidad's office, is people coming up with all kind of unique recipes where, as far as they're concerned, the reason why it tastes like that is because Granny always used to put her old socks in the thing, and they're sure that nobody else in the world ever made ginger beer with her old socks. And then, of course, there's always software. I mean, just to show that I'm not just talking about this stuff, this is my CSAC Climate Smart Agriculture compliant app that that has to do with software use and so on. It's part of a licensed brand, etc. So if you have ever created software that would start pumps, start your do the watering in your protected agriculture structure, etc., then all of that will pass under IP in real life. Okay, so let's just quickly talk about an audit because we're running dangerously close into the hour that we had set aside for the discussions. So conducting an IP audit, and I was lucky enough to conduct an IP audit for an entire country. What you're really doing is you're going into the business places and into the companies and asking them to identify what intellectual property they have. And that is always a big joke. I mean, as I said, without telling tales out of school, I went to a major oil company in Trinidad when I was doing this IP audit, and they had the temerity to tell me that the only IP they have is the logo. I mean, as the old people say, if you stick me, you wouldn't get blood. I mean, I was shocked because this is a oil company that was associated with a refinery. That was the only refinery I could think of in the world that had a wildfowl trust on it. I mean, could you understand the marketing value of saying that you have a refinery? I mean, you're part of one of the most polluting industries in the world, and yet still you have a refinery that protects wildfowl in this wildfowl trust. But anyhow, I don't think I want to dwell on that too much. So you have to be able to identify IP. In other words, you have to go through a list of stuff and say, what have I created from scratch? What have I developed? What is express creativity out of my mind or the mind of my employees? And having done that, the second stage, remember you're going to get all these slides so you can get to pause it and read it at your leisure. I just want to run through so that we can have the discussion. So you have to be able to categorize it and capture it. In other words, you have to know, well, what does this fall under? Will this fall under a brand? Will this fall under, some other form of copyright, etc.? And then the third thing you do is you decide how to use it. And this is where the fun starts. You have to ask yourself, are you going to protect it? Are you going to make sure you have your lawyers on the ball? Are you going to share it strategically? Are you going to profit from it? Or are you just going to keep it to yourself and keep it as a trade secret? Now, when we talk about monetizing IP in the open discussion, I hope you remind me to explain about the use of cocoa at the Hyatt Regency hotels, right? Traditional cocoa in use. So this is what it looks like. These are the 3 quick steps to conduct an IP audit. As I said, when you have the recording and you could pause it and you could read all of this stuff, these slides are just meant to be an aid memoir for me so that I don't leave out, important aspects as I rush through. And there are 6 ways that you can monetize your IP. And remember, I said in the beginning that I'm leaving this to the end for when we start about the open discussion, because I want this to be the part where we genuinely have a real conversation. So in terms of monetizing your IP, you could identify your brand, I mean, and that brand could be at the level of your farm, of your product, of your services. You can get into knowledge sales. You can sell how-to manuals. You could license, so that this product is being made under license from my farm or from my organization. You can use differentiation, like the use of a geographical indication. You can see that this rice is special. This rice you can't expect to buy this rice at the same price that you buy rice, ordinary bulk rice, because this is Moruga Red Hill rice. And this has special properties, and we're probably going to get a geographical indication for it, etc. Strategic partnerships. That same thing with the cocoa. My good friend Arthur Guerrero, he had cocoa in Lopino that was specifically planted and thing to be used in the spa in the Hyatt Regency. So that's why I'm talking about a strategic partnership. So you're not worried about what your cocoa is going to fetch on the open market, because your cocoa is going directly to an organization to be used in their spa. And then, of course, there are trade secrets, which, I mean, I think Angostura and so would be some of the most classic cases of that, and Coca-Cola as well. Because if I believe the stories, there are only 5 people who know the ingredients for Angostura bitters, and they're never in the same place at the same time, etc., etc., etc. So when it comes to monetizing your IP, what you need to do is to discuss your individual circumstances and see if you can explore some tailor-made solutions. That's why we left this aspect to for the open discussion. So what we are beginning to recognize is that the Caribbean does not only need to protect intellectual property. We need to learn how to strategically access it, adapt it, and deploy global intellectual property to solve our own development challenges. And with that, my good friends, I thank you. I'm hoping that I have stopped sharing. Nikia, could you advise me? Have I stopped sharing?
I believe so. Yes, you have stopped sharing.
Great.
So
and
thank
now
you,
I am
Steve.
back live and in person to take your comments. All those people that may have fallen asleep.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Please wake up now and you get to look me in the face and tell me that I was speaking rubbish. Oh, remember, I'm extremely thick-skinned there. I usually boast about the fact that I facilitated a session where all the participants were armed. Who didn't have a rifle sling over their shoulder, had a cutlass at their waist and thing, and that didn't intimidate me. So your comment telling me that I talk rubbish will not intimidate me. So that's
yes. Sarah is saying we have no sleepers. It was very interesting. Afia said she loved it. So I think it's quite an informative session, that a lot of things that, some of us probably would never think of, and kind of making, using those examples outside of agriculture to let us start thinking of the amount of things in agriculture that, we may need to start thinking a bit more deeply as it
and culinary tourism as well. Because all the hotel surveys that I've ever done in my life as part of the agritourism efforts with people like Fortuné and so, always the guests always mention the food. They travel because of the food. You know what I mean? And everybody has sun and sand. That's not a big thing. But you come for the food as well. And that's the link with the environment and the link with agriculture. So let's...
So we already have someone hands up. Sita.
Yes, Sita, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead, Sita.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm in Grenada.
Right next door. I'm in Grenada as well, as you know.
Oh, is that right? No, I didn't know. Anyway, yes, this was really interesting. And I was just curious because you didn't make any mention of it. You can tell that I was at some point living in Canada. As an educator, I used to create a lot of educational material.
Right.
and I applied for a copyright certificate. So you didn't mention that you had to apply for these IPs. It's not that I create something and it's automatically protected.
No, if you were living in Trinidad, I can speak with authority for Trinidad and the Caribbean. Copyright is an automatic right.
It's an automatic right?
Yes, but not in the US. In the US, you have to register it and all that. In
same with
Trinidad, it's an automatic right. Yeah.
Right. So, okay, if that's the case, then I had a friend that during COVID invented a hand sanitizing machine.
Invented, you say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In his workshops, he's a machinist, welder slash inventor. And I spoke to him about doing a patent on it. So I went to the intellectual properties office. And to do a patent, you had to go all the way to England. Now, she said that they're working on getting it done in Grenada. This was just after COVID, like right when COVID, everything opened up.
I can speak with a fair amount of authority about that, Sita. I understand what you're saying. The benefit of coming out of the system with dealing with Jamaica and Trinidad and Barbados is that in Trinidad you have patent inspectors, so that it is possible, to have preliminary stages of the patent process done out of jurisdictions like Trinidad. I know that the CCRAF office here cannot do it. So that the fact that you had to go to England explains that, that the patent end of the operation is highly specialized, let me put it that way. And we are fortunate in Trinidad in that we had, people like Richard Aching who were, by the way, another plug for agriculture. There are a number of people in the IP office in Trinidad who have agriculture first degrees. There was Richard Aching, there was Nicholas Lushu, some other people. So that I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sita, but I'm saying that is a consequence of the office not having the internal mechanism to do something like a patent. Yeah. And even though they may have signed on to the Patent Cooperation Treaty, I'm starting to drift into IP rights now. So please forgive me if I don't have everything down pat, because I made it a point at the beginning to say this is a conversation about intellectual property. Intellectual property rights is the domain of lawyers. Yeah. But I can tell you that the CCRAF office in Grenada does not have that facility. That is why he was told to go to England. So go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Yeah, there was one last thing. So I just want to get this clear. So if I create a recipe, okay, and there's no other recipe like this on the world, nobody else is using this, not combination of ingredients, or just these ingredients.
Yeah.
And I produce it and I put it out in the grocery stores, it's automatically IP'd?
No.
I have to register it.
You'd have to brand it in some way. It would have to be Sita's secret sauce. Or Sita's or Sita Nicholas bitters, or Sita Nicholas sweet bread, whatever.
Right.
But then it would be the trademark would be what you would be looking at. So that the CCRAF office here can do that. So that you can have it trademarked, so that, okay, let us say, let's take something like spice bun, or even better example, tasty patties, right? I'm here advertising Tasty, so all my friends in Jamaica, please make sure that that you go to Tasty and tell them that Steve recommended it and that I should get 3 or 4 complimentary Tasty patties next time. Yeah, but you see where I'm heading, right? So that once you have it branded like that, then that it means something. That's how you protect it. And I mean, we're doing that in the Caribbean all the time. That's at the shallow end of the IP pool. When we start going to freedom to operate, that is where the fun really starts. Because whilst your machinist friend is very talented and invented something. Most of us are not that gifted. What we are probably able to do is innovate. You know, we may use an ordinary hand sanitizer and fit it, you know, to do something different,
Yeah.
to do something weird, or you know, it can be used next to your steering wheel. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, right? So that aspect of it, you know, we can handle. But that's at the deeper end of the IP pool, you know. And when you start talking about how do you protect those rights, that's when you have to talk to the lawyers, you know. And I am not qualified to do that. My only gift, my only superpower is that I can spot brilliant people from a mile off. I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. I'm being very serious. So that I remember speaking to Professor Michael Taylor about Dale Rankin. I mean, I knew from day one that Dale would be a super scientist. I mean, his highest awarded PhD in physics, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that I'm at the creative and scientific end. How you protect it is where the lawyers come in. And I'm not, that is not my strong point at all. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that. Thanks for your question, Sita.
No
Thanks
problem,
for the
Sita.
response,
Thanks for that.
Steve. Yeah, of course, there would be the intellectual property, and then there would be those components that goes into the legal components of things.
Of protecting it.
You're protecting it, voila, and having that documentation to prove it as proof of that.
Exactly. So sorry to interrupt you, Nikhila. Let me just harp on that point about the importance of lawyers. Yeah. If you take tangible property, I mean the property that you know you can hold and touch and you know. So you're 2 a.m. you're in your pickup and you have 200 pounds of sweet potato in the tray of your pickup. If the police stops you, right? The only way you can prove ownership is to use some sort of legal document, a receipt, yeah? Or a farmer's ID, which has legal standing as well. So you understand what I mean about the fact that you can't have property without ownership. And the way to prove the ownership is where the domain of the lawyers come in. Yeah? Sorry, Nikita. I just thought
no problem. So
that
while we
tangible
are
example.
discussing, I know some people have to, you know, jump off to other activities.
Yes.
So I have launched a feedback poll just to get an idea of how you felt about the session and the content.
But I'm seeing hands up, Glenn and Dwight.
Yes, hold on, Steve, I will. So we have the feedback poll. So just look on your screen, and while we go through the questions, then we will move on. So thanks everyone. Thanks to all those who have to leave now. Thank you for joining us. So with that, we'll take you, Glenn. I'm asking you to unmute.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, man, definitely.
Yes. Thanks for your presentation. Quite interesting. Just a quick question here. How does IP relate to minors, young children? When you may have a young genius on your hand, right? You mentioned your son. Does the ownership belong to the child or come under the management of the parent until they become an adult, or how does that work? Thank you.
I as I said, I don't want to overstep my bounds now, but from what I remember, you know, there are age limits to some of these rights, right? You have to be an adult, so then the guardian will be in charge of it, yeah? But to the extent that I would have had experience with youngsters, I'm talking about school-age children entering competitions, let's say, yeah? Like that jingle competition thing wasn't made up, you know. I actually remember the case, right? Where a youngster came up with this jingle for a particular competition in school. The advertising agencies heard it and heard about it and wanted to buy the rights to the jingle. But it was going to be used for a product that the parents, and it's parents now, not the child, the parents were not agreeing with. So that shows that it is the parent that that has the legal authority to enter into agreements. Yeah, Glenn? So,
yes.
So that's what's, so, and an aspect that we have not mentioned at all had to do with performances and so on, because that is more commonplace. I think most people know that IP has to do with recordings and performances and so. So Glenn, if your son, sorry, or if school-age kids in Barbados had developed a particular landship, you know, and they wanted to be sure that that wasn't copied, literally, then a recording of that landship could be then anybody else showing that recording could then have to attain copyright permission from the landship participants themselves. Am I making sense, Glenn? In terms of performance rights, because there's copyright and accompanying rights. Again, I don't want to overstep into the lawyer's domain, but I'm just saying that the protection is available, right? Even though I may not be able to articulate it properly. But for your specific question, minors are not allowed to, I don't think minors are allowed to negotiate stuff like that.
With most things, even when you have a lot of the court cases, those things, you have the
legal guardian.
Cases, a legal guardian appointed by the courts.
Yeah.
So we do have questions that were in the chat. So I'll take one question from the chat, and then we will take Dwight, whose hands is up. So how can intellectual property protections encourage innovation in agricultural practices and crop development?
All right. One of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about was the UPOV convention. I mentioned it in the second slide, which has to do with the unique protection of plant varieties. A lot of us in this sector have come up with unique operations, ways of doing things. We may have come up with an innovative way to plant sweet potato. We may have developed a slip machine, let's say. Right? I'm just making stuff up quickly as we go along.
While we on it, I think we're taking the question of somebody else, like if they create a new variety crop by mixing two existing varieties, will they be able to get protection?
That there again, you have to go to the lawyers, because some of the countries in the Caribbean, not all, unfortunately, that's why I've seen that I've been fighting over the last how much years to get all of them interested in geographical indications, the UPOV convention, and freedom to operate. So let me just tell you how this falls into the UPOV convention. UPOV convention is the International Plant Varieties Act that has to do with how you protect unique varieties that have been developed in your own country, and including part of your biodiversity, part of your natural biodiversity. So yes, the answer will be yes, protection is available, but first of all, you have to know what you have. I mean, remember that's the idea behind the auditor. A lot of people are sitting down on intellectual property and they don't even know they have it. So I think the idea behind today's session was that you're now starting to look at stuff that you have and ask yourself, is this something that I created? Is this something that is born out of my own creativity, right? Is it being expressed in a particular way? And now that I've figured that out, how do I go about owning it? Because it's only your property if you can show that you own it. And that is where the lawyers come in, So I'm saying that far too often we have been sitting on intellectual property in the agricultural sector without even knowing it. As I say, a simple thing as a how-to manual. Not everybody in the whole world knows how to knows the best way, as far as you are concerned, the best way to plant ganja. And I'm saying ganja now, not in terms of marijuana, in terms of there's a sweet potato variety in Jamaica that I particularly like that's called ganja, right? So that you could develop a how-to manual and how to, and this is something that people like Dr. Rankin would have worked on over the years in terms of the best way to produce this particular variety. And if you could then find a way to differentiate it, either by way of a geographical indication or by way of branding, so that this sweet potato now is, has certain magical properties. So for the Dominicans, I would say Dominicans who are old enough would remember blow teas. Nikhila, you heard of blow teas, right? Right.
Yeah,
so Blow used to have a very good bois bandé tea. Don't ask me how I know that. I'm just told that Blow had a very good bois bandé tea. Right. So I'm saying that there are many ways, of branding, trademarking, and licensing our stuff, but you have to be aware of it first. And I think this today was about ignorance.
Awareness, yes.
So once we step out of that stage, then we can go on to
Yes.
protection.
Yes, and of course, definitely the different terminologies. Sometimes people tend to use them interchangeably, which in most cases should not.
Yeah.
But so Steve, what we're saying there is we have to get on board a lawyer to do a follow-up in terms of the legal component of this.
Yeah. Once we are sure that that people grasp the IP part of it, because it's no sense talking about IP rights if you don't understand what the IP part of it is. So I'm hoping that this would have been a start, and that the next phase would be how do you protect, because you can only protect things that you can identify.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
Great. So we are coming up with the time and we don't want to rush and we want to take everyone's question. So what intellectual property strategies do you feel help small tourism businesses compete with larger international operators? I guess we could broaden it outside of tourism to agriculture.
I can speak with authority about that, because as I said, I was a Green Globe consultant back in the day. And I remember, and I think I can use these examples because these are the owners. I know the owners personally. So you have a property that's in Tobago, like Rainbow Inn. Rainbow Inn is located next to Rainbow Waterfall. Yeah. And at the time when we were working with Mrs. Coombs Johnson, they were looking at how do you have this as a small boutique hotel now? So you're catering for a particular kind of tourist. So they were in no way prepared to compete with Magdalena Grand or any of those big hotels in Tobago, right? As a small hotel, you can use your IP, you can use your brand, whether it be through Green Globe certification or through some other aspect of your marketing to say that, okay, all the produce from this farm goes to our restaurant. Yeah. And in that way, and I'm not just making this stuff up, I'm telling you that from an actual example, that is how Rainbow Inn was able to survive literally in the midst of all the high-end hotels in Tobago. So I'm saying that it calls for a little more creativity, which is what IP is all about. Yeah. How are you going to now be creative in terms of how I market this property? Do I use the location? In their case, they were located next to Rainbow Waterfall, yeah, which is a small waterfall in Tobago. Or am I going to use the fact that all the ingredients are grown on the back of the property? Or are we going to use the fact that it's on a particular trail, etc.? So I think what the person who asked that question could probably, Nikita could probably share my contact with them, and we could probably have a longer, more frame.
Yes. So for any further
also everybody,
details,
you can give my email and stuff freely. Yeah,
no problem.
That's not
okay. And of course, I see Angela Knight seem to have quite a bit of experience in that field, sharing some of those information in the chat. Of course, just feel free to add anything, raise your hand. Thanks, Angela. So I see Alberta. Alberta, go ahead and unmute.
Hello, good afternoon.
Dr. Storytell.
Yes. In looking at the whole issue of the variety protection, one of the things that related to the UPOV would be being able to show uniformity and distinctiveness, which would then mean there is a sort of intermediate step before you even reach, let's say, to the lawyer and legal aspects.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I don't know how well that may be developed. I don't know if you could speak to that, those sort of key intermediary things that need to happen. And related to once you now protect your variety and be able to even gain licensing and sales through it, beef your value added products now, because you have value added products that linked to a species that is already high value. So I wonder if you could speak to some of those intermediary steps along the IP value chain.
Yeah, I could, with a little bit of authority. I mean, I was lucky enough to be, when I did my postgraduate work on campus, it was on Pigeon P, just like you are, fascinated with Kajan yourself. I did my work on UB 17 and UW 26. And those were varieties that bred through, yeah. And I'm not sure at the time, because I'm talking about the 1990s now, 1980s, 1990s, how far they would have gone in terms of, well, UPOP wasn't in existence then, but how far they would have gone as having them as registered, authentic, unregistered varieties. What I can tell you is that as part of that intermediate step, and I was hoping that that Richard or maybe Reagan Asgarali or even Heather, people from the IP office in Trinidad would have been online to provide me with some assistance. But I can say that whilst you're waiting for that level of certification, Dr. Alexander, yeah, you have to now see what are some of the other steps, as you quite rightly said, in the value chain that you could capitalize upon. So you could talk about a pigeon pea dal that was made from this particular variety, and if you can come up, you can ascribe certain characteristics to it, whether in terms of its nutritional content, its ease of use, because that's something that's very important to it, ease of use. Yeah. So that is one thing to have a pigeon pea that would make a good dal, but how easy will it be to use? What would be some of the techniques that you need to use? In terms of unique varieties and unique products, I mean, one of the most fascinating things to me over the years has been Kobe beef. I mean, we talked about Kobe brand before, but this is Kobe beef now. There's a specialized beef done in Japan. I mean, where you give little slivers of that beef as a gift. I mean, that's a big thing, this is clearly a level of branding and trademarking that is out of this world, so that people go crazy for a little sliver, almost a whiff of Kobe beef, because of the expectation from the branding and the fact that those animals are reared in a particular way, they come from a particular gene line, genetic line, etc., etc., etc. So I'm agreeing with you, Doc, that yes, there are intermediate steps, but as I said, there are IP offices in the Caribbean that are able to handle that. I mean, as I said, luckily for you and I, we operating out of Trinidad, so that the IP office in Trinidad has the required expertise there. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So I'll take a question from the chat. Of course, Jamaica, we have some persons putting some of the information. We actually have a lawyer on guiding
I'm sure you have more than one lawyer on. Yeah, lots of lawyers on. I invited quite a few of them.
Excellent. So we appreciate that added support to provide that additional knowledge to persons in the session right now. And of course, it's really important also for the agriculture sector, because we do a lot, and sometimes
it goes underreported.
And then realize that was something that was from the Caribbean sometimes, and so the protection is also important, and having the lawyers provide that support. Even the clarity for us to understand it in the first place. So we are thankful for that. So the next question: how can the seeds government support small farmers, crafters, and tourism operators in accessing and utilizing intellectual property tools?
I mean, well, that's a big one. I mean, how can they by just starting? To be quite honest, I mean, the thing is, how many of the small operators would have ever heard of Green Globe? I mean, that's a good starting place. How many of them would have seen some of the efforts, let's say out of Suriname, the Torarica's eco lodges, some of this stuff happening in Guyana in Tri-Lakes area, what Kapui has been doing. I mean, I don't know where to start. The thing is that awareness is the first place. And I think today's session was just about hopefully opening some eyes to the possibility. But to get into the granular detail, I mean, we'd have to have one-on-one conversations for that, to be quite honest. I don't think I don't have a universal salve or a universal ointment that we could just rub onto all governments and expect them to do it. But
the
I want to
awareness is
encourage the questioner to contact me directly, and we can have a longer conversation on that.
Okay. He's very easy to find. Just type Steve Maxime on Facebook, LinkedIn. You will find him very easily. And of course, with my follow-up emails, I will be sharing the information.
I can share my WhatsApp as well. Is that a problem?
Yes, no problem. Okay. So you did make reference to, persons owning those photographs. If the photographer takes it, it's their property. So someone, of course, out of curiosity, is asking, so why do people who publish others' personal photos on the internet could be charged for publishing the photo?
All right. Okay. Now, the differences have to do with the circumstance. If I'm parading in public and you take my picture, that has nothing to do with invasion of privacy or anything like that. You can only write that picture. If I happen to be famous, and you're now literally capitalizing on my brand, and the circumstances under which the photograph was taken weren't strictly controlled. In other words, it was not a point, it wasn't a job. You didn't ask me to take your photograph. If you follow me, Nikia, right?
Yeah.
That would be. So when we talk about invasion of privacy, again, please don't have me stepping outside of my bounds. I am one of those people who I know my lane, right? My lane is not rights protection. My lane is creativity and development of the IP. The IPR is not in my wheelhouse. So I think I'll just beg off at that point and say that, there are circumstances under which if you took the photograph under those kinds of situations, then the subject of the photograph owns some of the rights. Yeah. And that is why nowadays you can go to performances now and there are strict signs, no photography, no videotaping, because people are protecting their performance rights. In other words, only the people who are authorizing to take these videos and then post them on YouTube for benefit or for economic gain are the ones that are allowed to do it. In other words, I don't want you coming into my panorama final point in case and videotaping my performance, and monetizing it illegally.
Okay. But I guess a lot of the times, well, again, if you encroach on someone's privacy, of course, where you may have taken that photo, the repercussions it might have on the person's personal life, and
of
also
course. And if they are better lawyers than you, you're in real trouble.
And of course, if you're making money out of it, brings it to even a further level. So right. So we have a few other questions. Right. So I think we discussed that doesn't one have to register for an IP. So we did touch on some of those.
Okay. But as I said, some of them are universal rights, and the copyright one is universal. The problem with a universal right is that, okay, so you don't have to register it, but how do you protect it? And that is where you have to, go to a justice of the peace or somebody, have a stamped copy of the authorized copy of the work, so that you can prove that as of 15th of April 2026, this is something that I developed. It's something that I wrote. Yeah. So I hope it doesn't give the impression that just because it's a universal, you could just get up one morning and say, this is copyright because I don't have to register it. No, you still have to prove. And you do that by going to a GP.
Proof, yes.
Proof of ownership.
Just like with scientific work, you have to prove the research and it's different and all of that.
Same example, sorry, the same example about it, pick up with 200 pounds of sweet potato. The only way you can prove that as your sweet potato is if you either have a farmer's registration card or you have a receipt from somebody where you bought this to. Otherwise, the police are going to think that you stole it.
Yes, which is a lot of the challenges when there is theft of produce. I know people in the agricultural sector, there's pretty larceny.
That's why I'm saying, because there's property like that, and then there's intellectual property that you can't see that people steal as well.
Yes, exactly. So you refer to a trade secret registry in Trinidad. How is this managed from a confidentiality standpoint, that these people don't leak the people's secret recipes or what have you?
I know, I don't the same way that they protect Angus too. I mean, it's registered as a trade secret, but it doesn't have it's not an explanation of the trade secret, just registration as a trade secret,
So you do not provide them the details of your
it's not as
recipe.
if all the ingredients are in there.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. And I said I wanted a
That
particular
answers the other question as a trade if you keep your information. Yeah, because a lot of those food chains like KFC, all of them have their secret recipes. It's not something that
allegedly, yeah.
allegedly.
And it's not just the old socks. It's not just the old socks that you put in the gravy or something. Because,
right. So we did touch on it. Maybe
did we catch Dwight? Did we take Dwight's question? I remember Dwight. There was somebody named Dwight with a hand up very early on. Did we take that question?
I am not sure.
Dwight, did we take your question?
As I'm doing a lot of things in the background, I'm not sure if I
remember
I think so.
Oh,
I think so. I think so. Yeah. Because it was the last hand up, I believe.
Okay.
Okay, I see Marius. Okay, Marius, you could come back with your hands raised so I could request you to unmute if you want to ask anything. So I guess we could touch on it a little more again in terms of how agriculture can benefit from IP. The person said they are only aware of intangible IP.
No. There's very tangible IP, and the Lanaf box I was telling you about, the box by Lennox Lampin, that's tangible. You could pick up that box of stuff and go with it. You can pick up branded cocoa from Arthur Guerrero's estate and go with it. So the intangibility is the worth of the brand, but the actual physical product is there. You can pick up a bottle of Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah.
But you can't value the brand Coca-Cola just by picking up one bottle of Coca-Cola. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I see you, Dale, asking you to unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning.
We're not hearing you, Dale.
You're sounding very far, Dale. If you could probably come closer to your mic.
Yeah, we're not hearing you.
Is that better now?
No.
Not much.
I don't know what's happening. Well,
you're sounding really, really far.
Maybe you could type it in the chat and Nikhil would ask it for you.
Yeah, or try getting a little closer to your microphone. Right. So in the interim, while Dale is sorting that
let's see
out.
if that's sorted out.
Oh,
is that sorted out?
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Much better. Much better.
No, go ahead.
My apologies. I had my mic on my head. No, this is such an interesting.
It is about intellectual property. You should be doing it in your head anyhow.
Yeah, this is such an interesting discussion because I've recently started doing some work and trying to do some mobilization in the area of agro-processing, right? Now, when you look at, and you use the example of pepper sauce. Every island has pepper sauce, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, when it comes also to recipes, every island basically has the same food, but under a different name. I don't know if, and sometimes they may have, let's say Trinidad may have a little different ingredients in it, but they're basically the same thing, right?
Yeah.
How can this work from an intellect, from a IP perspective in terms now of, I'm looking at specifically for agro-processing, how we now take the fruits and all of the other stuff that we go to waste to the processing point.
I'm glad you brought that up, Dale. So sorry, let me just tackle it as the thoughts come to me. There are some aspects of intellectual property that have to do with agro-processing. One of them has to do with dehydration. And I was lucky enough to know Captain Stoll. It's a Guyanese guy who owned an American patent for dehydrated fruit. Now, listen to me carefully. Yeah? Dehydrated fruit is not the same as dried fruit. It's not the same as desiccated fruit. Dehydrated fruit, a dehydrated mango will still be yellow. Yeah? It won't be going brown and all kind of strange looking colors and all that. So that dehydration was a specific technology that Captain Stoll had a patent on. So that in agro-processing, there are a number of aspects of it that you can have intellectual property protection, that you can have intellectual property involved. It could be in the choice of ingredients. It could be the choice of peppers. It could be the choice of ingredients as the additives in the coloring or whatever. And then it could be in terms of the process. So you can have a process that is protected in that you boil it, you mash it, you make the mash. And I remember when I used to work with Miller's pepper sauce in Barbados back in the day. So you have your mash, all the mash is imported from the same place, right? It's stored for a particular length of time. It's boiled, it's all the other things you have to do with it. Then you add ingredients. So that's another section of the IP there. Then there's the branding. There's the fact that Windmill, that was Miller's brand, if I remember correctly. Windmill pepper sauce now is pepper sauce that comes in a bottle with that Windmill logo. Yeah. In the same way that the power of a logo and the power of a label, if you look at Angostura bitters, I don't know how many of you know the story of Angostura bitters and that oversized label. It started off as a mistake and now it's an identifier. I mean, you can't find Angostura bitters anywhere in the world without that oversized label, right? And the label looks like a mistake, as if, well, they had the bottle and, the label was too big, which is true. So I'm saying that in food processing, you have a number of areas for possible IP intervention in the choice of varieties, the way it's done, the circumstances under which it is done. So like, if you're talking about processing of coconuts, then there's cold press, there's virgin, there's, double virgin, whatever. The idea is that when you're talking about something as involved as agro-industry, there are a number of aspects of it. So in other words, one thing doesn't cover everything. There's no one size fits all that says, this is how you protect our agro-industrial product. So that the technology involved might be different in terms of whether it's drying or desiccating or just the way it's grated. Yeah. We think of products like cassava, and so the time period between grating it and leaving it to steep or a million other things there. So I hope I haven't complicated. What I'm saying is that there's no one agro-processing IP formulation.
So Steve, the curly fries is patented.
Sorry, right?
The curly fries. You have these curly fries.
Oh yeah. Somebody would have might have protected that. But another thing to remember, there's a difference between a unique recipe and a copyrighted recipe. Yeah? A copyrighted recipe doesn't have to be unique. In other words, it's just that you are the only one selling it under this brand that adds 2 ounces of glucose and 6 pounds of pepper and 1 shadow benny leaf. Yeah? That's in your recipe, right? But so that whenever I buy your brand of pepper sauce, that's what I'm getting, hopefully consistently, right? But it doesn't mean it's a secret recipe because the ingredients are on the label. Yeah?
Yeah.
The ingredients for Coca-Cola are not on the label. Or for Angostura, not on the label. So they might have a product that, I use the example of Windmill. I hope Windmill is still not on business still, so it doesn't look as if I'm promoting. So, and you have to list, you have the Bureau of Standards insist that you must list the ingredients, right? Because you don't want to poisoning people by having, somebody old socks in it or something. And I'm fixated on the old socks thing. When I talk to you individually, I'll tell you where that story comes from.
Thanks for the question, Dale. Of course, we have Angela giving us a lot of things: the Windmill pepper sauce, the family story, F.A.T.E trade secret.
Hey, yes. Somebody remembers Windmill? Somebody remembers Windmill? Okay.
Well, I guess lawyers would know these cases.
Yeah.
So if you create a brand using a family name, can other family members sell similar products under the same name without your permission?
And that's a ticklish one. I would depend. Like, okay, let us assume Baron was a surname, right? So Baron's pepper sauce. I mean, just because I'm a Baron too doesn't mean that I would be able to, I could make a pepper sauce too and call it Baron's pepper sauce. I'm not too sure that is how that works. I think the contractual and the sign up arrangements would be would be specific to the family members involved.
Okay, so our lawyer Angela is telling us it's a tricky issue. You would have to consider whether it's a joint venture, who came up with it. I guess we would have to go to the lawyers.
Yeah.
The lawyers for that. Yes.
Thanks, Angela.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela, our lawyer in the background supporting us.
One of the lawyers in the background. There are a lot of lawyers in the background who probably not prepared to give us advice for free.
I know we appreciate that. That's what the CCRAF is there, you know. Persons come on, they give us a little bit of their time for free to make us a little more aware, start thinking outside of the box. You know, sometimes when we into things and not really in aware of certain areas, we all, you know, sometimes we check lawyers is big money talking there, you know, those kinds of perceptions that we already have. And so we are very happy to persons like yourself. Thanks, Angela, in the background there, and all of our presenters who have given, you know, the knowledge for free, which they could probably have IP to as well, but they have chose to share it with us and give us some leeway to share it with others as well. So someone is saying that as a small ruminant farmer, I've come up with creative ways in areas of heavy lifting on the farm, parasite management, and creating my own sustainable feeds and watering systems. I have been sharing some, but now I have realized I've been sharing too much.
All right. Let me tackle that. Now, especially in terms of small ruminant care. I mean, I remember the work done at the Sugarcane Feed Center in terms of proper crosses. I mean, I was hoping that people like Cicero Lalo and so would have been on this chat who are experts in that field. But the idea is that there are a number of innovations that take place on farms all the time. I mean, you could come up with a very creative foot bath that is not just standard, you know, standard tray and cattle walk through it. And so there are people I know of in the Caribbean who have rather sophisticated foot baths so that the animal not only presses on a pad, but you get actually like waters, like jets squirted onto the hooves, etc., etc., etc. So I don't know what this particular person is talking about, but on the business of whether you're telling too many secrets or not, I just want to caution you on the other side of things. I remember the very first flower show that Montserrat Flower Society had. They invited me to be the feature speaker. That's somewhere in 1992. And I remember telling them that many times horticulturists try to hide stuff. You know, they might find this is a really strange looking Exora or strange looking hibiscus, you know, and they figure they want to tell anybody about it because they want able to steal it. But when you look at the general scheme of things, if you're talking about monetizing hibiscus, I mean, in Montserrat, you're not in a position to monetize anything like that, right? So then, rather than hide it and say you're not sharing it with anybody else, then there might be a way of franchising it. In other words, you know, saying that this is, okay, without going out through the legal processes, this is Montserrat, this is a Montserrat green, you know, it's the only green hibiscus flower, you know, that we know of, or the only green striped hibiscus flower that we know of. But because of the fact that you're in Montserrat, I mean, how are you going to monetize that? How are you going to monetize that on a mass scale, you know? How many hotels you're going to have that growing at in Montserrat alone? You know, now with Valley View and all those places destroyed after the volcano. So the idea is that it is one thing to have something as a trade secret, it's another thing to be part of a conglomerate or to be part of a movement. And that's where things like fair trade come into play. There's no such thing as an individual fair trade farmer. You have to belong to a fair trade group, right? That's where the strength in numbers came from, because nobody in England ain't going to buy fair trade bananas from you if you just have one farm, one fella producing 2 boxes of banana a week. I mean, that doesn't mean any sense, yeah? So that there are times when you need to collaborate just in terms of the volume to be able to make sure that the sales make sense. Because even if you were producing small ruminants at a very high level, yeah, and you're in a small country where the demand is not going to be able to, you know, to sustain your production. Yeah, it makes sense collaborating.
Right. So of course, if it's something you feel you could possibly make, you know, money out of, you think you want to protect it or something of that sort. Well, Angela is advising us
consult a lawyer, yeah.
Keep them secretive. If you're going to register it, let your employees sign non-disclosures agreements. And you also could put confidentiality clauses in the contracts and so on. So you do have a lot of that when, you know, companies hire persons. If they're developing something, they will institute some of these and
as I said, you know, what I'm telling you about is not stuff that I'm making up. I was actually on the CCRAF, the very famous CCRAF, Caribbean Industrial Research Institute. When they were developing their IP policy, because they were operating without IP policy, right? You then had to have these scientists now sign on to the fact that when you work in certain industries in the US, even if you leave the job today, you can't work for a similar agency for the next 3 years or whatever because of the information that you would have been exposed to in this workplace. Yeah. So that CCRAF was able to craft, you know, specific kinds of legislative documentation so that their employees would know that if you're sitting down in your bathroom at home and you come up with an idea while you're working for CCRAF, that idea is not yours, you know. So you don't have to be sitting down in CCRAF's lab. Yeah. So stuff like that. Yeah. So it gets pretty involved. But as I say, Angela and the lawyers are better placed to
there was someone's hands up.
Sorry.
Please feel free to raise back your hands. I see Sita is back. Go ahead, Sita.
Yeah, I just want to give you an example of what you're talking about. For instance, my brother, who is a chemist, while he was at university, was working for Black's, the photography company. He was the one that developed the formula for the special processing of the photographs. They used to have the fishbowl with the fish swimming in it. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't, but go ahead, explain it.
Yeah, but because he was working for the company, he had no rights to that formula.
Yep. Because he would have signed a document whilst he was employed.
Right.
That says he doesn't own the IP. Yeah.
Right. So that's an example. But that commercial would be all over TV. It was quite popular back probably in the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an environmentally friendly formula for developing photographs. Okay. I don't know if you remember, they had the fish swimming in the fishbowl.
It didn't use silver nitrate as like the normal. I think I remember. Yeah.
So it was my brother that developed that.
Cool.
Working for Blacks. So just an example of how that works.
Yep.
Thanks so much for that example, Sita. I think sometimes some universities make you sign those things within your research that it's the property of the university. So we will take that.
Now telling things out of school, we had a IP policy that very few of the lecturers knew about. So that's
so we will take Milanda. Go ahead.
Hi. So I asked a question a while ago about the creativity. So I'm a livestock farmer, and I do want more people to join the industry. So I share a lot of my innovative methods on social media, but it gets to a point where I have had organizations, they want me to share my creativity with them. And now that I listen to you, I realize, maybe that's not such a good idea, because I'm not sure. When it comes to my feed, I created my own feed. I create my own feed. I do not share that with anybody else. I also make soap from what other farmers call the waste from the livestock, primarily the fat from the animals that I use to make tallow. Now I have this issue with people actually wanting me to show them how to do it and whatnot. But my issue is, how do you come from just creating stuff yourself to actually getting to a point where you can say, you know what, this is mine, and I'm not supposed to give it out. Yes.
Ownership. And once you say ownership, you're talking lawyers.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be my first port of call, first bit of explanation. That's why I made it a point very early in the presentation to say that there's a strong link between IP and lawyers, and it has
lawyers.
rights. You see, we as agriculturists, we could talk about the saponification and the this and the that and making it soap and all that, but when it comes to protecting it, you need an Angela, you need a lawyer at that end of it, right? But we can have a conversation on some of the strategies we're using, if it be considered part of climate smart operations, or you could brand it and all that. We could talk about that.
It is climate smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Why I think I brought that up, right? Because, I already know where you're heading. But I'm saying that, at the protection end, and the idea of other people using your creativity without at least acknowledging you, because a lot of times you do not only want the financial return, you want the recognition as well. You want to be known as, this is a Coulston method. This is the Coulston method.
Yes.
So even if you don't get any financial return, at least, your kids and things will be able to say, just like how Sita was talking about what her brother did, people will be able to say, my parents came up with the Coulston method, and that is.
Yes, like for example, I have this thing. My farm is on a slope, and it's very hard for me to carry heavy the feeds and everything down. So I came up with a method of, instead of just carrying every day, I actually bought a zip line, which
I use a pulley. Yeah.
And on the farm. And a lot of people are kind of, oh, but how did you even think of that? But it's just making my work lighter at the end of the day.
Easier. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So I have placed Steve's information in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to him
we can carry on that conversation because
Thank you so much, Milanda, for that, and continue the great work that you're doing. Of course, if you want to share some of those information through the CCRAF to support some of the persons in small ruminants, we're open to that as well. Of course, with guidance from Steve as to how you should go about doing that. So Steve, what about if the person have never seen something, it came from their mind as part of a creativity trial and using what they have to make something, and someone claims that it was the idea? What do
there's no such thing as ideas in the intellectual property. Everybody can have ideas. I had an idea to produce a cow that would eat grass and spit milk, but I mean, it was just an idea. Intellectual property doesn't recognize ideas. It has to be the express creation. So you have to write down that stuff, how you were going to do it, then you can get protection for that. But just having the idea of having a zip line is not enough. You have to either have a record of the drawings for the zip line, so that is no longer an idea, it's expressed. That's why intellectual property is always expressed. It's never just the ideal. Yeah? So I think we can shoot down that earlier club. That is not an issue at all.
Okay, so we're on our final question in the chat, and if anybody have any burning questions, feel free to raise your hand. Yeah. So Tamara is telling us that IP does not protect ideas or thoughts or concept. Your idea must be in a tangible, fixed format.
Expressed. It must be expressed.
Voilà. Exactly.
There you go. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Right. So on UE, is this IP information being taught as a course at the FFA, if you're aware of that? Or a project can be launched to assist FFA and USDA by extension to address this latent IP, which it has.
Well, as the person who ran the business office in the faculty, a million years ago, I can tell you that at the time, yes. In terms of specific courses, not even all lawyers get to do specific courses. I mean, I know that Professor Justin Koo is now leading that charge at the Faculty of Law. So but I'm not sure what specifics that the Faculty of Food and Agriculture has in place. So I can't speak to that. I can't speak to current stuff.
Okay, thank you so much. And outside of that, somebody was asking about, you mentioned Lennox Lampkin, is it the organic farmer in Leeward, St. Vincent that you were referring to, and in what reference?
Rose Hall, up in Rose Hall, yeah, man.
Yes,
that's my boy. Excellent. That's my boy. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I said none of the examples I gave were fabricated there. These are people I know, I worked with, and that's why
these are real life experiences.
Exactly.
That keep have our brains thinking a little more as it relates to this area of IP and what it means for us in terms of protection of some of the work that we are doing in the region. So we are at the end of our session. I'm not seeing any other questions. So I want to say thank you so much, Steve, for facilitating this session. I believe it has been, as we call it, an eye-opener for many of us. Hold on. We have another question before I close. What are some guidelines to get an IP for specific products and how I can get to learn more? So you could reach out to Steve. Of course, we do have persons that can provide that support. So yeah, the person wants to know what are some guidelines to get an IP. I guess that you would really need some more details and deep discussions to go into that. So Mina, just feel free to reach out to Steve. And of course, he can provide you with any further information. Yeah, thanks, Lisha. So that was the last question we would have answered. So Lisha, it's not about just having the idea. If the person show proof that they have it already trademark, patented, or whichever one of those, then, because sometimes even if you come up with an idea, somebody could have the same idea. It's which one of all you went the legal route to protect it. So that is where it becomes more important. Yes, business logos. We did mention some of the business names, business logos. These are IPs. And of course, to protect them, that's where the lawyers and the legal component of it comes in. So it's not just that I have the IP. If you want to protect it, then that is where you have to go the legal route. Okay. So thank you so much, Steve. If there is any last thing you would like to ensure that persons leave with today, please go ahead.
Okay, just take a slow look at the recording, pause and read some of the stuff that I ran through, quickly. I think it's some of the information on the slides, could be helpful when you pause the recording and read, some of the stuff that I glossed through. Yeah.
Okay.
But thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for showing up. Thanks a lot for not sleeping. And I hope you have, creative expansion, and that you realize that IP is not a legal imposition. It is an economic imperative. In other words, you don't protect your IP, you don't recognize your IP,
Thank you so much, Steve. Please feel free to reach out to Steve, as he said. Let me share my screen in the meantime so we can show you what is coming up next while I am speaking. So thank you so much. And as I said, Steve wears many hats. He has worked in terms of developing what we call the climate smart agriculture. Give me the correct name, please, Steve. CCRAF. So, there are a lot of other areas we can pick Steve's brain for, some guidance as we delve through the agriculture sector. And of course, not just the agriculture sector, but some of those interlinked sectors like the tourism sector. And so with that, thank you so much, Steve. for coming on today and presenting on a not so popular topic, which is of great importance to us and to you, the persons joining us. Thank you for joining us, staying on the whole 2 hours plus with us. And so through our beginner to business, I know many of you requested a session on aquaponics. And so Mia has gracefully accepted to do a presentation for us next week, Wednesday, the 22nd. So please feel free to join us. I'm going to just share the information in the chat that you could register. Of course, you can go to our various social media pages, our website, so you do not always have to wait for an email from me. I know it can get pretty annoying getting loads and loads of emails. So just please feel free, go directly to our website, go directly to our Facebook, Twitter, X. If you don't have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have, well, X is Twitter, LinkedIn. I know some people don't have certain social media, but you could go to our website. Anybody could access our website. You don't need any profile, anything of that sort. So thank you so much for joining us. And as we continue our special editions, if any person out there have anything that they feel it would be of value that they want to share, the platform, we do make the platform available to various partners, other institutions. You do not have to pay for it. So please feel free to reach out and we could organize to facilitate a session for you. I know we have some of the lawyers on. If you feel that, you know, you would like to contribute and delve a bit more in the intellectual property rights in terms of the legal side of things, we would also appreciate that. And so you can, you know, reach out to us. So it was lovely for me to be in all the Caribbean countries and even outside of the region. I'm starting to feel more and more as an international person. I cannot tell people that I'm only from Dominica now. So, you know, I'm taking up residency in all the other countries because if each session, you know, having all of you on, we are, you know, really being one coordinated group, getting the information. And of course, we will be having our CCRAF on the road. Our first country this year is Grenada. And so we will be heading to Grenada the week of the 18th of May. And of course, we are in the planning phase and we will provide you with more details as we go into finalizing things with the ICA delegation in Grenada. So please note, we do have national ICA offices in many of the countries. We have offices in Belize, Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, but the offices in Trinidad, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Barbados, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, the office is Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, the office is in St. Kitts. We also have offices in Haiti, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. I'm not always directly involved in all the country-specific initiatives, so please feel free, you know, reach out to your offices, get an idea of what they're doing, how you can get the information or be engaged in some of the on-the-ground activities. As we said, we don't want to just share knowledge with you, share information, but we want for some of those practical actions, which in most cases are being done by the offices, and I'm not, you know, always aware of it. It's not possible for me to know what is happening in all these countries. And so thank you so much again. Thank you, Steve. And thanks to all of you. And let me unmute all of you. Hold on, where is my Zoom thingy? So we can say goodbye.
Bye all.
Hold on, let me stop. Okay, so thank you so much. As I said,
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Steve. Excellent job, moderator.
And thank you for a pleasant workshop, an interesting one too.
Goodbye.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Blessings.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you. All right, take care, everyone. It was lovely having all of you join us today. Looking forward to seeing some of you next week. So please remember to register. Thank you, Chandra. Take care. Bye-bye. All right. Bye. Finish. The